האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening. Dobra V'Yetcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Behar, this week's Parsha. We're going to take a look at Os Aleph, section number 1, but this is part 2. Previously, we did the first part of this section, which is a very long section. And tonight we're going to pick it up where we left off the last time and do section 2, which won't part 2, of section 1, won't complete it. But it'll move us a good way along the path. Before we begin, let's take a look at two psukim from our parsha right in the beginning. This is the beginning of Parsha Behar. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem spoke to Moshe Behar Sinai on Mount Sinai, Lamor, saying, next pasuk, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, speak to Bnei Yisrael, ve'amarta aleihem, and you should say to them, Ki savo'u el haaretz, when you come into the land, asher ani nosein lachem, that I have given to you, that I'm giving to you, v'shavsa haaretz, and the land should rest, Shabbos lashem, a Sabbath to Hashem. And if we were to keep reading those psukim, of course, we know that the Torah is teaching us there about the mitzvah of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year, the year in which the farmers and everyone stops planting and growing and harvesting, and they stop all of the normal agricultural work, and they let the land rest, and they share their produce with their neighbors and everyone else, and they also cancel loans. All kinds of very wonderful and kind of amazing, interesting things happen during the Shemitah year. So that's how our Parsha begins, and in the first section of this, in the first part, I should say, of this section, number 1, the Zera Shimshon quoted Rashi, who asked a famous question, why did the Torah mention Har Sinai here when it talks about the mitzvah of Shemitah? Because after all, Rashi says, weren't all the mitzvahs given on Har Sinai? Why did the Torah decide to single out its discussion of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year, and mention Har Sinai as it did in the first pasuk that we just read? Why did it do that? So Rashi answers and says it's to teach us that just as Shemitah, the laws of the sabbatical year, the mitzvah of the sabbatical year, was given to us with all of its general rules and its details and all of its fine points, so too all of the mitzvos that were given on Har Sinai were given in that same way. Just like Shemitah, all of the other mitzvos were given with their rules and their details and their fine points. And that's the way that Rashi is usually understood. However, in the earlier part of this section, again, which we did previously, Rashi brings various questions, the Zera Shimshon, brings various questions on the Rashi, and comes up with a novel interpretation of Rashi, which is that what Rashi was really trying to teach us is that Shemitah, the laws of Shemitah, the mitzvah of Shemitah, and Har Sinai have many things to compare them. And they can be compared in their general rules, and they can be compared in their details, and they can be compared in their fine points. And in the first part of this section, the Zera Shimshon went through the general idea, the most broad idea, fundamental idea that's similar, that connects Har Sinai and the mitzvah of Shemitah, and that is that just as it's a mystery as to why Hashem specifically chose Har Sinai to give the Torah on to the Jewish people, to meet the Jewish people there, so to speak, and give them the Torah, just as that ultimately is a mystery, so too why Hashem chose the 7th year to give the mitzvah of Shemitah is a mystery. And so there's a similarity there, a very strong similarity there. We're going to pick it up right now in the first column that you see on the right, with the words ufrato seha and its details. And here the Zera Shimshon is going to get into some of the details of Shemitah and how even in the details, the sabbatical year can be compared to Har Sinai. So let us begin. Ufrato seha shel hashmita. The details of Shemitah, hainu, they are, shenesar lonu avodas hakarka. It's forbidden for us to do agricultural work. B'ma shemoil lehatzmiach, to do things that would be helpful in causing the earth to sprout forth, to give forth produce, ulegadel gidulin, and to raise up things that grow. So that's what Shemitah. That's a very important part of the laws of Shemitah. We don't do things that promote growth. V'chosfu hameforshim, and the commentators wrote, lefi shehu adon ha'adonim. That the idea, one of the ideas behind Shemitah that underpins Shemitah is that Hashem is the great master of all powers in the universe. V'yesh yecholes biyado, and he has certainly the capability in his hand, levatel kol hakoach v'hamemshala, all powers and all forces shel hatachtonim, of the lower worlds. Hashem, of course, created everything in the universe and therefore controls it and can dominate it, can change it, can do whatever he wants with all of the things that might seem like incredibly powerful forces to us, cosmic powers and forces, natural forces. Hashem controls all of that because he created it. Shezeh hakoach shematzmiach hasodos ve'hakramim. And an example of this is the power that Hashem invested in the fields and the vineyards to matzmiach, to grow, to produce things all over the world, whether it's grass coming up out of the ground, vegetables growing, trees, flowers. The whole world has been invested by Hashem with the power to grow things, to sprout and to grow. Eino yochol lehatzmiach ba'oso hashana k'moshe hoyerotzeh. Hashem could have made it that the earth could not grow anything during the Shemitah year or during any period of time. Hashem has the ability to cause a cessation in the power of the earth to grow things, and then the earth wouldn't grow anything at all. Al derech yoser mima sheha'egel rotze linok. And this is a side reference the Zera Shimshon says, along the idea that the Gemara, as you can see, a Gemara in Pesachim teaches us that more than a calf wishes to suckle from the mother, para rotze lehonik, the mother cow wants to give milk, to provide milk to the calf. So too, even more than people want to grow things, Hashem wants to provide people with all of their sustenance from the earth, and that's why Hashem created this widespread natural phenomenon of all the different types of growth that happen. However, if Hashem wanted to stop it, he could have just stopped it during the Shemitah year, and he wouldn't have needed to tell people don't grow things, because he could have just stopped it every 7 years. The earth could just not grow anything, let's say in Eretz Yisrael. V'ha'adam dai lo lihistapek, and mankind, men, it is sufficient for them to be satisfied with what grows by itself. Ve'eno yochol lihishtadel laharbos klal bigia kapov. And mankind is told that he's not able to go put out effort to make the earth produce more produce than what it naturally would make, even without being worked. So the point here that the Zera Shimshon is developing is that Hashem could have refrained from prohibiting people to grow things in Eretz Yisrael during the Shemitah year, and could have just taken away, every 7th year, taken away the power of the land in Eretz Yisrael to produce crops and produce. but he didn't do that. Instead, Hashem said the ability of the land to grow things and produce fruits and vegetables, etc., is going to remain unchanged. It's going to still, that power will still be there. But humans, I'm telling you, Klal Yisrael, I'm telling you, don't put in the work. You have a mitzvah. You're prohibited from putting in labor and effort to have the earth produce more than it does on its own naturally. Next paragraph. V'chein hoya behar Sinai, and this is similar to Har Sinai, to Mount Sinai. Shehoyu nigbolim kol ha'am neged hahar. We see when we look at the psukim that talk about, in Shmos, that talk about when Bnei Yisrael came to Har Sinai, that they were bordered off. Hashem told Moshe to set up barriers so that the people could not ascend on Har Sinai. She'af al pi sheyorad Hashem le'enei kol ha'am, even though Hashem, as it were, descended in front of all the people, the events that happened on Har Sinai were completely visible to the people. V'chol ha'am ha'yu ro'im oso, and all of the people saw Hashem, meaning the things that happened and the way that Hashem wanted to manifest his presence. All the people saw that at Har Sinai. Lo hoyu rishoyim lihiskarev yoser, but they were prohibited. They were not allowed to come closer. They were not allowed to come up on Har Sinai itself to get a closer look, even though they might have had, some of them, a tremendous desire to do so. Kidei lehanos, in order to enjoy yoser more, me oro hagodol, from Hashem's great light. So at Har Sinai, just like during Shemitah, Hashem prohibits people from growing things, even though the earth maintains its power and ability to do so. So too on Har Sinai, Hashem could have made it that people just physically couldn't come up. Hashem could have instituted a natural phenomenon that would have stopped the people from coming up. But instead of that, Hashem told Moshe, explain to the people and tell them not to come up, and help them understand that they need to follow this mitzvah, this rule, this law, that they should not ascend on the mountain, even though they might desire to come closer to what was happening on the mountain. Next paragraph. Umitam zeh nitna haTorah al Har Sinai bo'esh. And along these same lines, this explains why the Torah was given on Har Sinai with fire. The psukim talk about, mention fire several times, that there was fire on Har Sinai and smoke. Shekemo sheha'esh mechamem umeir, just like a fire brings warmth and provides illumination. Ach misha miskarev etzlo yoser nisraf. However, someone who gets too close to the fire will be burned. Kach Torah. So too, this symbolizes the Torah. Kol echad ve'echad tzorich lizaher. Every individual needs to be careful. Shelo yihielo esek banistoros, that a person should not involve himself in the hidden mysteries of the Torah. Im eino ro'oi lekach, if the person is not fit to do so, if a person is not does not have the appropriate background in learning and spiritual level to involve himself in the hidden mysteries of the Torah, then a person should be careful not to do so. Rather, every person should be rejoice over his or her portion, shenosnu lo min hashamayim, that shemayim, that they heavenly that was given to the person from heaven in terms of that person's level of learning. So let's say a person is only able to learn Chumash on a basic level. Wonderful, be happy, rejoice in learning the Chumash on a basic level. If a person becomes more learned and more sophisticated, and they can also learn, let's say, Rashi or the Gemara as an explanation to the Torah, how much more they should be happy and rejoice, and so on and so forth. They should keep rejoicing with what they're able to do. But they will benefit from the heat and the light of the Torah, just like a person benefits from a fire. However, they have to be careful not to get too close in an inappropriate way, because then they could be burned, God forbid, just like if a person gets too close to a fire. So there's the symbolism of the fire representing the Torah. Uchedesiv, and this is similar to what's written in a pasuk in Koheles, ve'al, and do not, top of the next column, tischakem yoser, do not become too wise, a very unusual pasuk, phrase taken from a pasuk in Koheles. Do not become too wise, meaning do not attempt to study those things that you're not ready to study, that you're not ready to assimilate and to gain knowledge of. V'chein Shlomo, and so Shlomo HaMelech, who wrote Koheles, of course, said in the beginning, early on, he said in Sefer Mishlei Omar, he said, Ne'um HaGever LeIsiel. This is what the man said to Isiel. To Isiel looks like a name, but the Chazal teach us that it actually it can be broken down into the words, with me is Hashem. And the idea is that Shlomo, earlier in his life, said that Hashem is with me. Hashem has blessed me with knowledge and understanding and genius that no human being was ever blessed with. And Hashem is with me, and therefore I don't need to be concerned about some of the things that other people need to be concerned about. I'm immune to all of that because of the great blessings that Hashem has given me in knowledge and wisdom. Ve'achar koch, but later in life, he said, and also in Sefer Mishlei and Proverbs, ki va'ar anochi, because I am a fool. So the idea is that Shlomo HaMelech himself realized that he was mistaken earlier in his life when he thought that he didn't have to worry about any of the warnings or concerns that other people had to be concerned about. He also realized that he shouldn't have relied on his extreme level of knowledge and wisdom, because ba'ar anochi, he was just like other human beings in the sense that we have to consider ourselves fools and ignorant in terms of being careful about all of the warnings that either the Torah that appear in the Torah or appear in Nach or appear in Chazal and Torah Shabbal Peh. We have to be careful about those things, and even Shlomo HaMelech admitted that. Next paragraph. V'od yesh pratim acherim, and there are other details b'shmita, in the laws of Shmita, domim lehar Sinai, that are similar to Har Sinai, to what happened at Har Sinai. She'im yishmeru hashmita, because we learn that if the Jewish people are careful about observing Shemitah, the sabbatical year, lo yihiyu golim me'artzam, they will not be exiled from their land. So if the Klal Yisrael, when they're in Eretz Yisrael, are careful about the laws of Shemitah, that will help maintain their presence in the land, and they won't be exiled from the land. Kemo shehayu hashivim shana shel golus Bavel, as we learn about the 70 years that when the Jewish people were exiled after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, the Jewish people were exiled for 70 years in Bavel, in Babylonia. Neged shivim shmitoi shebitlu. These 70 years corresponded to the 70 Shemitah years that they nullified, meaning that they did not keep correctly. So Shemitah is keeping Shemitah properly and meticulously protects the Jewish people from being exiled from the land of Israel, because there were flaws in the Jewish people's observance of 70 Shemitah years. That's a lot of years. That's 70 times 7 years altogether. And every seventh year when Shemitah came, Klal Yisrael was not as meticulous as Hashem had hoped and wanted them to be, and therefore they had to go into exile from Eretz Yisrael for 70 years in Golus Bavel to make up corresponding to those 70 Shmitos that they didn't keep meticulously enough. Similar to that idea about Shemitah protecting us from exile, when the Jewish people approached and came close to Har Sinai, konu hacherus, they acquired freedom, and we're going to see this means freedom from exile, freedom from being subjugated to the nations of the world. We acquired that when we came to Har Sinai. Kedichsiv, as the pasuk says, chorus al haluchos. The words of the Aseras Hadibros were engraved. Chorus means engraved, al haluchos, on the tablets. And Chazal teach us, as you can see in the parentheses there from Maseches Eruvin, Chazal teach us cherus mishibud malchuyos. The words were engraved on the commandments, on the tablets, and that word charus, engraved, teaches us about cherus. They were given freedom from being subjugated by the nations of the world. So the point that Zera Shimshon is making is another comparison. Keeping Shemitah protects us from being exiled and being subjugated to other nations of the world, and coming to Har Sinai freed the Bnei Yisrael from being subjugated by foreign nations. Next paragraph. She'af al pi shekvar yotzu lecherus, even though when it came to Har Sinai, the Jewish people had already gone out to freedom, miyom tov harishon shel Pesach, from the first day of the holiday of Pesach, meaning Zera Shimshon there's an implied question he's asking. How come the Gemara has taught us above that the Klal Yisrael became free? They acquired cherus, they acquired freedom from subjugation to the Umos HaOlam when they came to Har Sinai. Actually, they became free the moment they left Mitzrayim. The Yetzias Mitzrayim, what we celebrate on the first day of Pesach, happened before they came to Har Sinai, and that's when they became free. Sheyotzu miMitzrayim, because they left Egypt. Im kol zeh, nonetheless, lo hayu b'nei chorin gemurim. They were not completely free at that time. When Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, they were not considered b'nei chorin gemurim, completely liberated people. She'adayin lo nithara knesses Yisrael, because at that point, when they left Mitzrayim, the entire Jewish people were not purified legamre, completely, mitum asa shekibla miMitzrayim, from the impurity that they had acquired, or that they had received, that had come upon them miMitzrayim, from being in Mitzrayim all of those years. V'hoyesotricha limnos shiva nikiyim, and they needed to count 7 clean days, symbolically 7 clean days, which are part of the laws of purity and impurity. But vehem shiva shavuo shel sfiras haomer, they didn't just count 7 days, they counted the 7 weeks of what we know now as the sfiras haomer, and what we're counting now of sfiras haomer. So Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim on the first day of Pesach, but they needed the 7 weeks that we count the Sfira during. They needed those 7 weeks to come to Har Sinai, receive the Torah, and be completely purified. Kanoda etzleinu, as is known to us, v'chein kosav ha'al-sheikh, and so it is written in the Al-Sheikh commentary, u'v'yoim ha'chamishim shenis karvu eitzel Har Sinai. On the 50th day, when Klal Yisrael had passed these Shiva Nikiyim, these 7 weeks of purification after leaving Mitzrayim, then they got to Har Sinai, Az Nitharu Legamre, and they received the Torah and became purified completely. Ucheneged Zeh, next paragraph. Corresponding to this, Kosav Lonu Behar Sinai, the Torah in the very first pasuk we read, the very first pasuk of Parsha Behar, mentions Har Sinai, Eitzel HaShmita VeHayovel, next to the beginning of the laws of Shemitah, the sabbatical year, VeHayovel, and the Jubilee year. Yovel was a year of special mitzvos that occurred once every 50 years. The mitzvah was to keep 7 shmitos, in other words, 7 times 7 years. So that's 49 years. After 49 years, which would have entailed observance of 7 Shemitah years, 7 sabbatical years. The next year after that would be the 50th year, and that was called the Yovel year. And the laws of Shemitah applied during that year. So there were 2 years. The 49th year was a regular Shemitah year. The next year was the Yovel year. The 50th year, the laws of Shemitah in terms of prohibition of agricultural work applied in both years. And there were other laws that applied in that special Yovel year, a special blowing of the shofar, a special freeing of slaves, different laws regarding property, all kinds of special laws and mitzvos applied in the Yovel Jubilee year. Shehem Chamishim Shana, which is the 50th year. Neged Osama Chamishim Yom, and that corresponds to the 50 days we just talked about when the Jewish people were traveling from leaving Mitzrayim up to Har Sinai. So again, we're the Zera Shimshon's illustrating for us another comparison between Shemitah and Har Sinai, and in this case, he's bringing in Yovel, Shemitah and Yovel, and the 50th year corresponds to the 49 days getting up to Har Sinai and the 50th day at Har Sinai. Ve'oz kanu hacherus olam, and then at Har Sinai they acquired a full freedom. Ve'hacherus elyon, and this was a divine freedom, an ultimate freedom. Ve'nitaru mizu hamasam, and they became purified from their impurity. Kimosha amru zichronim levracha, as Chazal say in Maseches Shabbos. Yisrael she'amdu al Har Sinai, when the Jewish people stood on Har Sinai, Paska zu hamason, their impurity ceased, it stopped. What type of impurity are we talking about? Well, not just the impurity that the Zera Shimshon mentioned before that came from their years in Mitzrayim, which was a very tamei, impure place. Not just that. Let's continue and see what he means. The primary type of impurity that Klal Yisrael suffered from came from the chet of Adam and the eating from the Eitz Hadas. She'osa perud, because this made a separation, upegam, and a deficiency, ba'olam ha'elyon, in the upper world. Adam Harishon's sin of eating from the Eitz Hadas caused tremendously profound negative consequences for the world, and even ba'olam ha'elyon, in the upper world, and the supernal spheres. Ubemamad Har Sinai ksiv, regarding the Jewish people standing at Har Sinai, the Torah writes, it's written in the Torah, Vayichan Shom Yisrael, and Yisrael camped there. The word Vayichan is written in the singular form, as if it's talking about one person, one individual, when actually it was talking about a huge nation. And so we would expect the pasuk to say, Vayachanu Shom Yisrael, and the Jewish people, plural, camped there in the plural form, but it doesn't. It says in the singular form, as if it's saying he camped there or it camped there, singular. Ve'amru zichronim levracha, and Chazal say, b'leiv echad ke'ish echad. The Torah is teaching us by using that singular language that when the Jewish people were at Har Sinai, they were like one person with one heart. They were totally unified, as if it really was one person instead of a massive nation. And this was an incredibly magnificent and profound individuality, or unity, I should say, mishishim ribo shehayusham, from the 600,000 that were there, umikol haneshamos ha'asidos lavo, and also all of the souls of future members of Klal Yisrael who were destined to come into the world later on. So all of Klal Yisrael was there at that time. And of course, we know that the actual number, when you include all of the people, was much more than 600,000. It was close to in the area of 2 million people. And so, and all of them were there, plus all of the neshamos. And there was such a unity at that time that it was ki'ish echad b'lev echad. It was like one person with one heart. Continuing, v'lochein b'mitzvahs hayovel ksiv. And therefore, regarding the mitzvah of Yovel, this 50th year, this Jubilee year, it's written, dror ba'aretz lechol yoshveha. Freedom in the land for all of its inhabitants. Kishe'ein kol yoshveha aleha. This means that when all of Klal Yisrael is not in Eretz Yisrael, ein hayovel noheg. The laws of the Yovel year do not apply. She'eino kimo shehoya b'mamad Har Sinai, because then it would not be similar to the experience of all of Klal Yisrael at Har Sinai with all of its future neshamos. And Yovel, as the Zera Shimshon has been explaining to us, it has a strong connection to Har Sinai, Shemitah, and Yovel. And so just like every person was at every member of Klal Yisrael was at Har Sinai for the giving of the Torah, so too every person has to be in Eretz Yisrael for Yovel to apply in its full force. Lefi she'ein sham yichud gomor. Without all the people there cannot be a replication of this complete unity that occurred at Har Sinai. Omnam, however, hashmita noheges, the laws of Shemitah do apply. Afal pi she'ein kol yoshveha aleha, even though not all of the inhabitants are in Eretz Yisrael, Shemitah laws still apply. Lefi shehazuhama lo chozra limakoma, because the impurity that the people had until they got to Har Sinai, lo chozra limakoma, it did not return to its place. Once it was nullified, it didn't come back. V'adarabah, just the opposite, poska legamre mi Yisrael, it was completely removed from Klal Yisrael. So there's a distinction being made here by the Zera Shimshon between Shemitah and Yovel. When it comes to Yovel, the Torah wishes to treat Yovel more closely to Har Sinai than Shemitah, than the Shemitah laws. Yovel has to have all of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael for it to apply, whereas the Shemitah year laws apply even if all of the Jewish people are not there. Ve'od, and another reason for this, shehashmita hi hachona l'kedushas hayovel. The observance of Shemitah prepares the land and the people for the holiness of the Yovel year. Soon, God willing, the Beis Hamikdash will be built, will be rebuilt. V'yiskabtu hagolios, and all of the exiled Jews around the world will be gathered back to the land of Israel. V'yiyu yicholim l'kadesh hayovel, and then they will be able to sanctify the Yovel year. Ki yishuoscha kivinu kol hayom, because we wait all day, every day, for the salvation of Hashem. So the second reason that the Zera Shimshon puts in is if we stopped keeping the Shemitah year, because not all of the Jewish people were in Eretz Yisrael, if there was no Shemitah and no Yovel, then there would be no preparation to build up the holiness of the land and the people to be able to start keeping Yovel again when all of the people return to the land. And so therefore we keep the Shemitah year even during those years when the entire Jewish people do not live in Israel. But the Yovel year is not observed unless all of the Jewish people are in Eretz Yisrael. Next paragraph. Uvederech zeh yuvan hakosuv. Through this approach, meaning through the ideas that the Zera Shimshon has developed until now, a certain pasuk can be understood. Here comes the pasuk, as you see from Sefer Vayikra. V'ha'aretz te'azev mehem, the land will be bereft of them or forsaken of the people. V'siretz eshab soseha, and it will be appeased for its sabbatical years, ba shama mehem, when it will be desolate from the people. Vehem yirtzu es avonam, and they, the people, will need to be appeased, will need to seek appeasement for their sins. So the pasuk here is talking about when the Jewish people, chas v'sholem, sin so severely and consistently that they are exiled from the land, then the land will be able, because the inhabitants, the Jewish inhabitants of the land will no longer be there, the land will be able to keep the Shemitah sabbatical years properly because the Jews won't be there to work the land. Ve'od ksiv, it's written in another pasuk, Oz tirtzeh ha'aretz eshab soseha, then the land will be appeased for its sabbatical years, kol yemei hashama, all of its years of desolation, meaning emptiness, the nation will not be there, v'chulei, etc. Pasuk continues, Oz tishbas ha'aretz, then the land will rest, v'hirtzos eshab soseha, and it will be appeased for its sabbatical years. Kol yemei hashama, all of the days of its emptiness, tishbos eis asher lo shavsa b'shabtosechem, it will rest, and for the years that you did not rest during its sabbatical years, b'shiftachem aleha, when you dwelled on the land. So the Zera Shimshon has quoted these psukim to teach us, to show us, to illustrate for us again the close connection between observing the laws of Shemitah and not being exiled from the land. If the people don't keep the mitzvos and they don't keep the Shemitah years, then they'll be exiled from the land, and the land will then keep the Shemitah without them because the Jews won't be there to work the land. So the land will rest ultimately. V'koshe, there's a problem here with this idea, with these psukim. V'halo, is it not true, im yiglu Yisrael me'artzam, if the Jewish people are exiled from their land, tiyeh ha'aretz musura biyad ha'oivim, the land will be given over to enemies of the Jewish people. In other words, the land won't be empty. Whichever enemies come and conquer the Jewish people and bring them into exile, force them into exile, those enemies presumably are going to come into the land and settle there and live there. Vehem yavdu akarka b'shmitin uvayoblos, and those non-Jewish enemies will certainly work the land every year, even during the Shemitah year and even during the Yovel year. So how can there be any kind of rest and sabbatical year to the land? As the pasuk said, then the land will rest. So the Zera Shimshon is asking a very strong question. The Torah came right out and said, when the Jewish people, God forbid, go into exile, then the land will rest and its sabbatical years will be kept because they won't be there to work the land. So the Zera Shimshon says, wait, the land won't be empty. It's the enemies, our enemies will inhabit the land. And they're certainly not going to respect Shemitah and Yovel, and they're certainly going to work the land. So why is the Torah saying the land will rest and keep, so to speak, its sabbatical years once the Jews are exiled? Top of the next column. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, the Amrinan begitin perakeh, Chazal tell us in the 5th chapter of Maseches Gittin, Shishim ribo ayoros hoyo lo liyanai hamelech. There were 600,000 towns belonging or during the reign of Yanai Hamelech, Behar Hamelech, in an area of Eretz Yisrael called Har Hamelech, the king, the mountain of the king. Every single one of these towns had a large enough population to equal the people that left Mitzrayim. So let's even use the lower number of 600,000. Every town had 600,000 inhabitants. Continuing past that. Besides, for 3 of these towns, Shahayu Bohen Kiflayim Kiyotze Mitzrayim, that had double the amount of the people of Yotzei Mitzrayim. So you have thousands and thousands and thousands of towns with 600,000 people at least, and then you have 3 that have double that amount. That's what the Gemara says. Ve'amar le hahu mina leRabbi Chanina. A certain heretic, a non-believer, came to Rabbi Chanina and said to him, Shakre mishakritu. They are liars. The rabbis who taught this teaching about these 600,000 towns with 600,000 inhabitants at least in each one were lying. Meaning that didn't happen. That's impossible, this heretic said. Ve'omar Ula, and Ula, one of the sages of Chazal, said, Lididi chazi li hahu asra. I actually saw this place. I saw this place, Har HaMelech, ve'afilu shitin ravavosa kane lo machzik. And it would not be able to hold even 600,000 reeds, very, very slender reeds. So not only could this region hold thousands and thousands of towns, and each one had 600,000 people at least in it, not only did that not seem possible, Ula is saying, testifying, but even if you take slender reeds and bundle them together, this area couldn't hold 600,000 reeds. Upeirush Rashi explains, Hahu Asra. What did Ula mean when he said, I saw this place? Har HaMelech. He saw this area called the Mountain of the King. Mishak Risu. And what did it mean when the heretic said they are lying? De Omrisu Shishim Ribo, because they said there were 600,000 Ayoros towns, Hayu Bahar HaMelech, that were in this area called Har HaMelech, the mountain of the king. V'hu eino machzik, and it is not able to hold afilu shishim ribo kanim, even 600,000 slender reeds. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Gemara in Maseches Gittin. So we see there that anecdote. We see an anecdote in a story about a kind of controversy, you might say, over whether or not this area of land, Har HaMelech, could hold such a vast, huge population. Omar Le, so Rabbi Chanina said back to the heretic, Ksiv Ba, it is written about Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Tzvi. You can see the pasuk from Yirmiyah, from Sefer Yirmiyah. The land of Israel is referred to as Eretz Tzvi, the land of the deer, the animal, a deer, D-E-E-R. Ma tzvi zeh, just like a deer, ein oro machzik es besoro, its skin cannot hold its flesh. That means if a person slaughters a deer and then skins it, and then wants to take the skin and wrap it around the deer, now that the skinned deer, the meat of the skinned deer, it's not big enough. The skin of a deer shrinks after it is flayed, after it is removed from the body of the deer. Af Eretz Yisrael. So too, this is true of Eretz Yisrael, called the land of the deer. Bizman sheyosheveha aleha, at a time where its inhabitants are on the land, living in the land. Ravcha, it expands. Ein yoshvin aleha, if they are not dwelling on the land, if the Jewish people are not there, gomda, it contracts. Ad kan be Gemara. Until here is a quote from that Gemara. So in the Gemara itself, Rav Chisda answered the heretic who said it's impossible that land, Har HaMelech, could hold all those people. And Rav Chisda said, well, it depends when you're talking about. When all of the Jewish people are in the land expands to hold all of them. But when all of the Jewish people are not in the land, it contracts. And certainly if the Jewish people are exiled from the land, then it contracts, as we'll see in the next paragraph, which is our final one for this session. V'im kain, if so, Kishe'ein Yisrael ba'aretz, when the Jewish people are not in the land, nikre shavisa la'aretz, it can be called a rest for the land. Shahare lo nishar mimena el chelek me'at mizar, because what remains of the land after the Jewish people are removed from it is only a small, insignificant portion of the land. V'hasha'ar nelemes v'niskases. The rest of the land that normally would be present when the people are there is hidden and covered up. V'zohi hashvisa gemura sheyesh lo. And in that sense, it has a very real substantive rest when the Jews are exiled, even though enemies are there. In other words, when the enemies of the Jewish people inhabit Israel, it shrinks, and its land becomes hidden, covered up, and they don't get the benefits of the true space that Eretz Yisrael can offer. Ve'od, and another thing, she'af ha'chelek hakotan hanishar, even the small part of the land that remains when Klal Yisrael is exiled from the land, eino motzi kol kach peiros, it doesn't bring forth so much produce kemosha hayu motzi, as it would bring out bisman shehayu Yisrael aleha, like the times when the Jewish people were inhabiting the land. So the Zera Shimshon has, in terms of just this ending piece, the Zera Shimshon has answered his original question about how it can be that when the enemies of our people inhabit the land after exiling Klal Yisrael, how can it be that the land will rest? And the answer is based on this Gemara in Gittin, this idea that only when Klal Yisrael is inhabiting Eretz Yisrael does it expand and hold all of them and have so much more space and so much more produce and so much more fertility. However, when the enemies are there, whatever they do, whatever work they do is only going to affect a small portion of the land, and even that small portion is not going to work hard. It's not going to bring forth its produce like it does when Klal Yisrael is there. And certainly we have been had the merit since the Jewish people returned to the state of Israel in 1948. We've been able to see the incredible expansion of the ability of the land to hold so many, not just hundreds of thousands, but millions of people, and also provide food and produce and wonderful accommodation for all of them. And that should continue to grow and expand until the soon coming of Mashiach, when all of the Jewish people will be returned to Eretz Yisrael, God willing, in our days. Yasher Koch for joining us and learning the Zera Shimshon this week. God willing, we'll look forward to learning together again in the Zera Shimshon on next week's Parsha.